Joining me with more on this extraordinary political contest is Emily Hoeven of CalMatters. Emily, great to have you back with us.
Great to be with you, Alex.
All right, to quote Gavin Newsom, let's get back to work. And there is certainly a lot of work to be done in Sacramento. Emily, as you noted in your newsletter this morning, a lot of folks are saying, look, Gavin Newsom got a huge amount of support from fellow Democrats, from big unions, and now, kind of as they say, it's payback time. What does that look like in Sacramento as you see it?
100%. So we are seeing unions and labor groups today holding press conferences outlining their winning tactics that led the governor to victory. And there is a lot of pro-worker and pro-union legislation right now on his desk. The governor has about 700 bills that he has to decide the fate of before October 10th. And I think, it's going to sort of be like, hey, we helped you. Now it's time for you to help us. And I think we're going to see this carry over even into next year. For example, the progressive wing of the party is already saying to him, hey, we voted to keep you in office, and now it's time for you to deliver on certain promises like single payer healthcare. Yeah. So it's a never-ending battle and tug of war.
But it's so interesting, Emily, just to go back to what we heard from Gavin Newsom at the very top of the show. Last night we also heard him saying we've got more in common than we do differences. After this very contentious recall election, it seems like it's going to be really hard for him to do both things, right? Try to bring us all together. At the same point, you've got a very progressive wing. It seems like a tough act to balance, no?
It totally is. And I think in a way, it's also kind of contradictory to the message that he campaigned with, where he was, calling the recall a Republican recall, and, kind of emphasizing the difference between the people that supported him and the people that wanted to get him out of office. And now he is going to have to reconcile those things, those fractures in his own party. And the Democratic Party, because of the fact that it's a supermajority here in California in the legislature, the differences are really not between the Republicans and the Democrats, but between the different factions of the Democratic Party. And the question is, can Governor Newsom hold that together for 2022?
2022, which people were already starting to talk about last night. We need a break for those of us who cover all of this stuff. But we get no break. And there's a lot to be read just in terms of some of the results, which, I just want to reiterate, they're still coming in. But at CalMatters, you guys have got a great election results tracker that you can check out and look at how votes are panning out by various counties. And one of the things that I find really fascinating is how the candidates line up on question number 2. Larry Elder, of course, remaining far and above the top of the heap there, which was as predicted. But at least at the time that you and I are speaking, in the number 2 slot, meet Kevin, YouTube star Kevin Paffrath. What do you think's going on here, Emily?
I really think that has to do with the fact that he is a Democrat. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who, potentially, even if they wanted the governor to be removed from office, they would have wanted to see another Democrat be in that replacement option. And so I think of the Democrats who were running as a replacement option, obviously Newsom and his allies wanted to keep out a prominent Democrat from doing so. But of the remaining ones, Meet Kevin has, the largest following. He had a sort of a name established for himself. And so I think that carried over. And actually, ironically, in San Francisco, as of this morning, that is the only county where Paffrath is beating Elder, which really underscores the fact that in San Francisco, they were really going for a Democrat in that area.
Although, once again, I just want to kind of add this postscript to it, that much of this is based on the early votes, which were the mail-in ballots, and it'll be really interesting. There was that red shift that we saw in the presidential election last fall. It'll be interesting to see, what kind of shifts and settles in the days and weeks to come. Emily, I want to take a look at another little bit of Gavin Newsom's speech from last night. Let's take a listen.
I think about just in the last few days, and the former president put out saying this election was rigged. Democracy is not a football. You don't throw it around. It's more like antique vase.
Now, folks who are really in it, like you and me, will know that is kind of a rehash and a reboot of something that he had said earlier. Before he said antique vase, he had likened democracy. He said it's not like a football that you can throw around. It's like a Fabergé egg, which, of course, everyone's like, Fabergé egg? What world do you live in, Gavin Newsom? And I want to actually refer here to one of my favorite political analysts, my mom, who texted me last night and said, you know, this was kind of the most down-to-earth version of Gavin Newsom that I've seen in quite some time. And she felt like, well, maybe he's been humbled by this whole experience. And, you know, my mom's an English teacher. This isn't her business. But I think it was actually a pretty astute political observation. What struck out to you just in terms of Gavin Newsom's tone last night, Emily?
Yeah, you know, I was there and he was pretty sober and subdued. And I think it's one of those things where he didn't want to have a big victory party, because I think the whole notion of having a victory party to defeat an effort to get you out of office sort of doesn't really make a whole lot of sense politically. And I think he wanted to just give it the minimum amount of attention possible and kind of just put a pin in it and say, you know, we're moving forward. And I think he also was sort of trying to say, this is not about me in some respect. He was saying this is part of a larger trend we're seeing in our democracy where people are, you know, questioning the integrity of elections and people are calling fraud when they get results that they don't like. And that's something that's really dangerous and we need to defeat. And so I think we're seeing this become a larger campaign pitch from him in a respect for the Democratic Party to contrast themselves with people like, you know, Larry Elder and other, you know, sort of very right Republicans.
Yeah. Emily, one of the other thing to note about his speech last night, it was kind of brief, especially compared with Larry Elder's, and then he was out of there. There was no questions from reporters, which of course meant that we didn't have the opportunity to hear from him. One of the big questions that people are now talking about today, is it time to reform the whole recall process here in California? What's the latest on that front?
Yeah, well, the governor didn't have to speak because the lawmakers did. And actually today, the Democratic leaders of the elections committees in both the Assembly and the Senate announced plans to put together a bipartisan commission to look at examining different reforms to the recall. It has the support of the leaders of both of those houses. I've previously talked to former Governor Gray Davis, who has said it's time to put together this bipartisan group. And so I think you are already seeing a lot of momentum for that. And I think part of the reason why it may be better received is because of the fact that Newsom right now is winning by so much. If it had been a very small victory and you had Democratic lawmakers going in and saying, oh, it's time to change the rules, I think a lot of people would have cried foul. But the fact of the matter is, you know, it's sort of similar to the last election, 2018, when he won. And so I think they have some more, you know, support behind them to do that.
And Emily, today, President Joe Biden released a statement on Gavin Newsom's victory, and he said, and I quote, "This vote is a resounding win for the approach that he and I share to beating the pandemic. Strong vaccine requirements, strong steps to reopen schools safely, and strong plans to distribute real medicines, not fake treatments, to help those who get sick." I'm just curious your take. First of all, do you feel like, you know, given the significant margin of victory we are seeing, how much does this just really embolden Gavin Newsom? And how much do folks in D.C. kind of latch themselves on to this significant Democratic victory going forward?
I think it's going to be a lot on both parts. I mean, I think first of all, for Joe Biden, it actually has been a boon for him to be attached to Newsom because Biden is going through kind of a difficult stretch of his own presidency. I think it could embolden the governor to move forward with even more aggressive mandates in the state, potentially a vaccine mandate to enter certain public areas, because the fact of the matter is most Californians who are eligible are vaccinated and their patience appears to be growing thin with those who are not taking those measures. And then I think because of the fact that he did win by so much, at least right now, you're going to see in the 2022 elections, a lot of Democratic people running for office hitting home that message of public health, strict measures, getting people back to normal life. And so I think it's going to be a playbook for a lot of Democrats for sure.
Worked for Gavin. Why not? It would probably will work well for others. We will see. Emily Hoeven, you can find her great work at CalMatters, and you can also find it on the Spectrum News app. Emily, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Alex.